first speaker today is Michael Wiant. A year after joining the Illinois State Museum Society in 1982, he joined the staff of the Illinois State Museum, and until his retirement in 2017, he served as director at Dickson Mounds, as the caretaker of the Illinois State Museum, and executive secretary of the Illinois State Museum Society. So if you have any question about anything involving the Illinois State Museum, he's a good place to start. He holds a bachelor's and master's degrees from Illinois State University and another master's plus his Ph.D. in anthropology from Northwestern, where his archaeological interest included Native American history in the Illinois River Valley. Today, he gives another side of the road to statehood, one that unfortunately hasn't been paid all that much attention to in the last couple hundred years, but is finally drawing its well-deserved attention. With his paper, quote, Native Americans in Illinois in 1818, Treaties and Treachery in the Path to Statehood. Please join me in welcoming Michael Wiant.
I've written out my remarks because today I feel that the words I have to share with you about this subject are particularly important, and I want to make sure that I get every point of it out clearly. So bear with me as I read. I'll try to read carefully and quietly, but I'm usually used to standing and throwing my arms around and going back and forth, so this is a bit of a change. All right. In addition to celebrating the establishment of Illinois as a state, as a member of a new nation, and all the accomplishments and contributions of Illinoisans, it is an opportunity to reflect. In 1783, Hugh Blair opined, quote, "For wisdom is the great end of history." With that statement in mind, we consider the path to statehood because for many people, it was daunting, arduous, and painful. Yet it is still traveled by many today. When will wisdom triumph? 206 years ago today, the landscape of what the French explorers called Pays d'Illinois, the land of the Illinois, or Illinois country, was divided. Americans and Europeans mainly inhabited the southern and western thirds of the Illinois country. At the same time, central and northern Illinois was home to a diverse assembly of both related and distinct native nations, many of whom had been forced from their traditional homelands by various circumstances. Regardless, this land had been their land for more than 10,000 years. Archaeological evidence provides a perspective of a much deeper temporal record of indigenous history extending at least 12,000 years into the past. With the discovery of 22,000-year-old fossilized footprints in New Mexico, the record of indigenous habitation in Illinois may extend back to the waning stages of the last ice age. Archaeologists have divided this history into periods of significantly different ways of life. Still, the precise link to contemporary tribes remains elusive but theoretically knowable using oral history and archaeological recovered evidence. For the past 2 centuries, at the least, the Illinois country was home to the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Chippewas, Chickasaw, and Winnebago nations. To the best of our knowledge, a caveat that includes gaps in our understanding of Native American history in the Midwest of North America. We must also understand and appreciate that these sovereign nations have survived profound, often immoral challenges. They have survived and thrived in the quest to preserve their heritage, honor their ancestors, and to secure their future. The path to Illinois statehood puts in sharp relief no less than an invasion, wrapped in legal documents and often negotiated with deceitful intent by a country recently untethered from European nations, but fearful that the yoke of subjugation was only a matter of time. Indeed, the War of 1812 was resolved only 3 years before Illinois statehood. It is perhaps an oversimplification that the United States encouraged immigration to promote safety in numbers, resulting in an unquenchable thirst for land. Based on historical information gathered by the Indian Claims Commission, established in 1946, to adjudicate tribal claims regarding the terms of treaties and to seek redress, we can reconstruct a model of tribal settlement in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. The first map, based mainly on French documents and tribal oral history, illustrates the 17th century presence of the Anoka, referred to by the French explorers as the Illinois, and closely related Miami tribes near Le Rocher on the upper reach of the Illinois River. The Anoka included the Cahokia, Kaskaskia, Michigamia, Moingüena, Peoria, and Tamaroa. René Cavalier Sieur de la Salle also mentions the Carquoitnon, the Chinko, the Tapora, the Omaraz, the Chapusa. By the end of the century, the Potawatomi had established communities in the Northeast. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the colonies hugged the eastern seaboard of North American continent. The route to the interior required an arduous trip over the Appalachian Mountains, and in the middle of the continent, the Ohio River was the major artery of settlement. American and European population growth in the mid-continent, illustrated by this logarithmic plot of the U.S., Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois populations between 1790 and 1840 in Illinois period. In Illinois alone, the population grows from less than 10,000 to nearly 1 million during this period. At the same time, the size of many native nations is declining in the face of numerous hardships such as disease, interruption of seasonal rounds, relocation, and conflict. Returning to the Claims Commission data, the 18th century witnessed the arrival of the second fox, the Kickapoo, a geographic expansion of the Potawatomi communities, and the relocation of the Illinois to the mouth of the Kaskaskia River. At the end of the 18th century, on December 8, 1795, the President of the United States, George Washington, expressed grave concern about the rapid expansion of American settlement, the terms of treaties, and their consequences. I quote, "The provisions heretofore made to protect the Indians from the violence of the lawless part of our frontier inhabitants are insufficient. It is demonstrated that this violence can now be perpetrated with impunity, and it can need no argument to prove that unless the murdering of Indians can be restrained by bringing the murderers to condign punishment, all the exertions of the government to prevent destructive retaliations by the Indians will prove fruitless, and all our present agreeable prospects illusory. The frequent destruction of innocent women and children, who are chiefly the victims of retaliation, must continue to shock humanity, and the enormous expense to drain the treasury of the Union." In the first 2 decades of the 19th century, Native American territory was juxtaposed with American settlement that were inexorably expanding in the southern reaches of the Illinois country. John Mellish, an ambitious map maker of the early 19th century, provides our best glimpse of the Illinois country at the threshold of statehood. Mellish provides a bird's eye view of Illinois in 1818. Southern Illinois is the beachhead of Euro-American settlement. At the same time, the land west of the Illinois River was made available to the veterans of the War of 1812 to secure Jefferson's goal of obtaining land east of the Mississippi River. Not illustrated by Mellish on this map, but in an 1820 edition, is the fact that tribal communities dotted the Illinois landscape Many had been occupied for decades, others recently established, due partly to William Henry Harrison's raid on Prophetstown in northwestern Indiana. President Thomas Jefferson envisioned and articulated securing the Illinois Territory for the United States, a plan implemented by the Northwest Territorial Governor, William Henry Harrison. In a letter to Harrison in 1803, Jefferson outlines his rationale and methods for securing the then western frontier. I quote, "To promote this disposition to exchange lands, which they have to spare and we want, for necessaries, which we have to spare and they want, we shall push our trading uses and to be glad to see the good and influential individuals among them run in debt. Because we observe that when these debts get beyond what the individuals can pay, they become willing to lop them off with the cessions of land. In this way, our settlements will gradually circumscribe and approach the Indians, and they will in time either incorporate with us as citizens of the United States or remove beyond the Mississippi." He continues, I quote, "The former is certainly the termination of their history, and they are most happy for themselves, but in the whole course of this, it is essential to cultivate their love." A difficult word following the first paragraph of his commentary. "As to their fear, we presume that our strength and their weakness are now so visible that they must see we have only to shut our hand to crush them, and that all our liberties to them proceed from motives of pure humanity only. Should any tribe be foolhardy enough to take up the hatchet at any time, seizing the whole country of that tribe and driving them across the Mississippi as the only condition of peace would be an example to others and a furtherance of our final consolidation." I want those words to sink in. This is the gentleman who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Harrison established his headquarters in Vincennes on the Wabash River, territory secured in the 1795 treaty with the Wyandot and others, including the Chippewa, Delaware, Eel River, Kaskaskia, the Kickapoo, the Miami, the Ottawa, Piankashaw, Potawatomi, Shawnee, and Weas, after the Battle of Fallen Timbers in Ohio. As an aside, quickly, this battle is particularly important because Anthony Wayne represents a well-organized federal force. The tribes, many of whom had aligned with the British, who promised the securing of their lands with the defeat of the United States, are headquartered at Fort Miami. As the battle ensues, the tribes begin a retreat. When they get to the gates of Fort Miami, they are locked out. And a treaty that ensues then involves giving up significant parts of Ohio and, as we'll see, Illinois as well. This treaty includes several parcels in the land of the Illinois country, including 6 square mile tracts on Lake Michigan, the eventual location of Fort Dearborn, another tract in Peoria on the Illinois River, the eventual location of Fort Clark, a parcel near the mouth of the Illinois River with the stipulation for unfettered navigation of the Illinois, a parcel at the location of the French Fort Massac near the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, and a 6 square mile parcel near the artesian salt flows near what would become Harrisburg. In 1803, Harrison embarked on a 6-year-long series of treaty negotiations that transferred most of the present-day Illinois from indigenous people to the United States. The first of the 2 treaties secured title to 90 million acres of land. The first treaty with the Kaskaskia on December 23, 1803, ceded approximately 40 million acres of land to the U.S. Using the murder of 4 American settlers who entered Sauk territory as a pretense, Harrison met with a delegation of Sauk and Meskwaki sent from Saukenuk to negotiate a resolution not to cede territory. Ultimately, they signed a treaty ceding 50 million acres of land for an immediate payment of $2,234 in goods and an annual annuity of $1,000 in goods. To put this in some perspective, Harrison sold 40 acres of land near Vincennes for $1,000 to pay for the bricks to build his home, Grouseland. A brief review of the November 4, 1803 treaty illustrates the architecture of many treaties, particularly their scope, their stipulations, and penalties. As noted above, the Sac and Fox immediately received $2,234 in goods, the equivalent of about 1 cent for every 20,000 acres. The $1,000 annuity added a value of 200 thousandths of a cent per acre. The U.S. agreed to protect tribal lands rightfully claimed, and if the tribe wished to sell their property, only the U.S. government was qualified to purchase it. Article 5 restrained retaliation for crime perpetrated by tribal members or settlers by due process conducted by the Superintendent of Indian Affairs in St. Louis. If the U.S. government owns the ceded land, tribes will be privileged to live and hunt upon them. And this would be a stipulation that would cause considerable difficulties for many of the tribes who believed this particular stipulation allowed them, even after signing these documents, to return to their home territories and continue on with their way of life. A government trading house will ensure that many goods may be purchased at, quote, a more reasonable rate than they have been accustomed to procuring them, close quote. The Sac and Fox and the Osage must settle their differences. This is a particularly interesting clause because one of the negotiators for the United States is Auguste Chouteau, the founder of St. Louis. Chouteau also has an exclusive trading right with the Osage. Finally, the Sac and Fox will permit the construction of a military post at or near the mouth of the Wisconsin River. Black Sparrowhawk was born in Saukenuk, present-day Rock Island, in 1767. Black Hawk provides a crucial perspective. The transformation of the Illinois country to the state of Illinois occurred during his lifetime. And his autobiography offers a unique perspective on some of the events of this period of Illinois history. Black Sparrowhawk, among others, was outraged by the transaction of the 1804 treaty. In his words, quote, I insisted on explaining to those 2 chiefs, here he's speaking to 2 federal agents, the true situation of my people. They gave their assent. I rose and made a speech in which I explained to them that the treaty made by Quashquamee and 3 of our braves, according to the manner of the trader and others had explained to me. I then told them that Quashquamee and his party denied positively having sold my village, and that, as I have never known them to lie, I was determined to keep it in my possession. More than any other in Illinois, this treaty was the source of disagreement. The issue was addressed again in the treaties of 1816 with the Sac and Fox, and that same year with the Ottawa and other tribes, who disputed the Sac and Fox claim to all of the territory included in the November 4, 1804 treaty. On December 30, 1805, Harrison secured another large parcel of land in the southeastern Illinois from the Piankashaw, and another small parcel from the Miami along the Wabash River in 1809. This would be the last treaty Harrison negotiated to secure the Illinois territory. A map based on Indian Claims Commission research documents the tribal landscape in 1810. It shows the locations of villages of many native nations, including Kaskaskia, Kickapoo, Meskwaki, Odawa, Potawatomi, Wautami, Sauk, and others. 2 treaties in 1816, one with the Sac and Fox, the other with the Ottawa and other tribes concerning the land west of the Illinois River, and a parcel in northeastern Illinois and land in northwestern Illinois. In 1818, a treaty with the Peoria and others reaffirming the 1803 treaty with the Kaskaskia realized Jefferson's goal and set the stage for Illinois statehood. Between 1816 and 1818, Illinois country land was acquired in treaties in which U.S. interests were represented by Ninian Edwards, the territorial governor of Illinois from 1809 to 1818, William Clark, the superintendent of Indian Affairs from 1822 to 1833, and Auguste Chouteau, the founder of St. Louis, a fur trader and politician, who with a partner had a monopoly in the fur trade with the Osage. As noted earlier, the 1818 Mellish map illustrates the geographic infrastructure of Illinois 206 years ago. The Kickapoo occupied land ceded by the Peoria for several decades in the 18th century. In 1819, the Kickapoo ceded their interests in this land on July 30th, 1819. The totality of the present geographic extent of the state was secured through a series of treaties with the Chippewa and others in 1829, the Winnebago in 1829, and the Chippewa and others in 1833. As illustrated by the Mellish map of 1820, the state's county governing structure stretched into central Illinois, where a large community of Kickapoo still resided near present-day Leroy. You can see with an eagle eye in the middle of the state a series of teepees drawn onto the map. This is the Grand Kickapoo Village outside of Leroy and Downs. And another group here, another Kickapoo village at the fork between Salt Creek and Sugar Creek. By 1824, new counties claimed the state's center of the state center to the Indian boundary line that stretched across from the southern end of Lake Michigan to approximately Rock Island. Following the last series of treaties, the northern tier of counties was established by 1833, transforming the cultural and political landscape in only 3 decades. The 1833 Treaty of Chicago reaffirmed all of the preceding treaties, and except for small parcels of land on the Kankakee River, Illinois was no longer Indian land. As noted above, the Indian Claims Commission was established in 1946 as an independent federal agency to hear and resolve claims made by Native American tribes against the United States. More than 850 claims were filed, but they were restricted to land value when they were taken. The commission could not grant or restore land. Between 1946 and 1978, the Claims Commission awarded more than $850 million to tribes. Cases not finalized by that time were transferred to the Court of Claims. In closing, we return to Black Sparrow Hawk, a warrior who defied political leaders of his tribe to return to his home with a group of men, women, and children, which would result in the loss of many lives. When Black Sparrow Hawk was born in 1767, all of Illinois was Indian land. When he died in 1838, none of Illinois was Indian land. For many of us who have reached our 7th decade, the profound transformation experienced by Black Hawk challenges our imagination. Sadly, we live in a world where human rights and dignity remain under duress, and people continue to be displaced. For wisdom is the great end of history. Perhaps our celebration will encourage us to foster a new dialogue with indigenous nations, once resident in Illinois, search for common goals, and invest some of the great wealth accumulated in this state to the well-being of the descendants of the original inhabitants of this land. Thank you very much.